Deep right field. Down the line it goes. Castellanos is out of room. It's out of room. Runner goes. 3-2 pitch hit down the line. Is it fair? It is a fair ball. Into the corner. Off and running. Chu. Yu Chang around third. He's going to score easily. And into second. Hit hard. Hit deep. Up and out. Goes Amed Rosario. And there's a fly ball. Left field. It's deep. It's up. It's gone to the porch. Pretty well. Deep left center field. It is gone to Souvenir City.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Guardians of the CLE Podcast. I'm your host, Max Goldstein, joined as always by my co-host, Mel. And tonight we're just going to be recapping the disappointing weekend in New York. Following that 3-game sweep against the White Sox, you had a lot of high hopes going into the Bronx, expecting a lot more out of the squad. We had a couple disappointing losses there. But Mel, how about you lead us into the episode and kind of display that disappointment from the team?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing to kind of remember with this team. So if we look back at the last 3 series, right? So we got swept by San Francisco, we swept the White Sox, and then we got swept by the Yankees. So we can see even just by these last 3 series, like this is going to be a really streaky team all season. And I tweeted about it the other day. Like that's one of the things with kind of developing a young team. You get the good, but you're also going to deal with those growing pains. And I do think this season is going to have a lot more good than bad. That's why I'm still standing by my 85 win prediction, but I don't think there's going to be much middle ground all year, right? I think we're either going to score like 8, 9, 10 plus runs a game, or we're going to score like 0, maybe 1. Like there's not going to be many where it's like 4-3. Like this team's like real feast or famine. And I kind of expect that's going to continue a little bit. But, I've been telling people as long as your expectations are in the right place, this is still going to be a really fun team to watch. Just look at all the guys, we've had make their major league debuts so far.
Right.
With Stephen Kwan and Connor Pilkington and even Kirk McCarty, Richie Palacios last night, Lavastida, Gabriel Arias, who we have not seen the last of. We get to see these kids grow right before our eyes. And, they're still managing to win some games. And we say it all the time, when you have pitching, you have a chance. You're going to have a chance. And this offense, I think, is going to be a little bit better than people even expected it to be. Like I would say coming into the season, my biggest concerns were the bullpen and the offense. And, the bullpen and the offense has been pretty good, where it's like, we're not even getting the best out of Savali. Quantrill came off the COVID list. He was pretty good on Saturday, which we'll get into. But, I think they could be even better. And they're still, managing to hang around 500. And, it's tough in April to not overreact. But I like what I'm seeing so far overall.
Yeah, it's kind of been like a boom or bust, like you were saying, feast or famine. And generally that happens with majority of the teams across the league. If anybody pays attention to the major leagues as a whole and monitors the teams throughout the league, it's kind of been the same sort of story. Like Mel just said, it's only April, where we're not even through the end of the month yet. So I too agree with saying I'm really excited to see what these young guys can do for the remainder of the season. I think, Mel, you and I had expectations that we weren't going to have like the brightest year this year, just because there were so many contract talks with surrounding Jose Ramirez, and we didn't really have too much movement in free agency. A lot of young guys, a lot of holes to fill. But when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, the way that these first couple weeks of the season have panned out, we are 7-9, right? I mean, we have had some chances. We had a couple games in Kansas City slip away from us. And, obviously that game in New York on Saturday with the walk-off win, but it's kind of going to be like this for a while. And I think with guys getting more consistent, Franmil needs to be more consistent. Amed Rosario needs to be a little bit more consistent at the plate. We're going to find our spots where we're going to find the success, but something the Guardians and, the Indians in the past have been notorious for are those long winning streaks. I mean, how many times have we strung together, 4, 5, 6, even 9 and 10 game winning streaks over the last couple seasons out of nowhere. I mean, we set the major league record a couple of years back with that Jay Bruce walk-off of 22 wins in a row. And, that was back in 2017, and we did have a much better lineup at the time, but, that obviously wasn't expected by anybody. But, just to, go right into it, this weekend series with the New York Yankees, I expected us to come out with at least one win, and I think it did just slip away from us on Saturday. Not much you can do when Cole is on his game, especially, giving up all those early runs. The defense was sloppy, but, let's just focus on Friday night for now. Aaron Judge was the difference in that one. He hit 2 home runs. He had 3 RBIs, threw out Andres Jimenez, trying to advance from first to third on a base hit. So not really smart base running on Jimenez's part when Jose Ramirez was due up next there. But, what do you think, was that game-changing, should say, a couple plays, string of plays that were game-changing in that Friday night battle?
So I really liked what I saw from Eli Morgan coming out of the gate. He had 2 scoreless innings, and he actually struck out 4 in those first 2 innings. And, as we've noted in past episodes, his velocity's up a couple ticks. He looks stronger. So I thought, we might be getting this new and improved version of Eli Morgan, which he wasn't bad. Like you mentioned, he gave up that home run to Aaron Judge, but he's going to give up those home runs. He's kind of a lesser version of Josh Tomlin, right? So if we keep our expectations in check with Eli Morgan, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Josh Tomlin won a lot of games here with us. He's never going to overpower anyone. He's always going to be susceptible to the home run, but he kept us in that game. And I think that's what's important. But I'd say that kind of a turning point in that game was Aaron Judge throwing out Andres Jimenez, because, and this is kind of becoming a pattern with Andres Jimenez, just doing kind of goofy things at weird times. Like his head's not fully in it. He's trying to go from first to third on a single, but you have Jose Ramirez on deck. You always got to know the situation that you're in. Instead of Jose Ramirez coming up with 2 guys on, a chance to drive in some runs, he's leading off the next inning. Where anytime you can get Jose Ramirez up at the plate with a chance to drive in runs, I'm going to really like our chances. But you're kind of just backing us into a corner when you're running us into outs. We're not good enough to run into outs, give up runs on defense, playing bad defense. This is a team that kind of needs everything to go right. They got to play really sound baseball, which typically a Tito Francona team, we're used to them playing sound baseball. And I think that's the thing with Andres Jimenez. Like, I really like what I see from him as he's getting consistent at bats. I think it's allowing him to settle in a little bit. But I just wonder about his confidence. Like, I know we'll talk about it later, but in the game last night, he's trying to bunt for a base hit with Austin Hedges on deck. And it's like, he's swinging the bat well.
Yeah.
You have Austin Hedges on deck. Like, try to get a hit, man. Like, you don't need to be trying to bunt for a base hit. Not to mention Michael Lorenzen's, he's an athletic pitcher. He's played the outfield before. So I think in that game Friday night, I really wish Andres Jimenez could have that one back, because that could have been a chance that we could have scored some runs. The game was still in striking distance at that point if we don't run into an out there. So again, growing pains with a young team. It's all things that I'm sure somebody talked to him about it when he got back to the dugout. But I think that was kind of one of the turning points early in that one.
Right. And, it wasn't all that bad Friday night. I know what was the score? Was the final 4-2? 4-1, 4-2. Yeah. So, I mean, it was close. And especially when you have Eli Morgan on the bump, a guy that has started for us in the past year, but he's still relatively young for sure. Just to have us in a competitive game in Yankee Stadium, that says a lot about his confidence, and I'm sure he'll keep that rolling throughout the season when we need him. But, another guy that we're going to touch on later in the podcast, Franmil Reyes, he hit a solo home run, made some good contact. That one carried out to right center. So just made it over the wall. So, I mean, that was good to see, the classic power of Franmil Reyes, but this season,
got it. He's got it in him.
It kind of just seems like, this year he's not really drawing that many walks. He has a few, but his eye at the plate, it seems like he's swinging at everything, just hoping he hits it. And, that swing gave us some confidence on Friday night. And as most of you listeners know, it hadn't really turned into any sort of fruition, throughout the rest of the weekend. He had a rough weekend, but I'm sort of just wondering what Tito's going to do. He sees him struggling. He's been a manager for a long time now, and a successful one at that. Future Hall of Famer for sure. So, Mel and I were talking before the podcast. Are we going to start seeing him drop in the lineup, or are we going to start seeing him get some more days off? What's the solution?
I think it's certainly time that we have that conversation. And I know it's uncomfortable to people because he's like our number 2 guy. When we talk about like reliable offensive bats heading into the season, the 2 guys we're going to talk about is Jose Ramirez and Franmil Reyes.
Right.
But what we're kind of starting to see now is teams are starting to pitch around Jose because they're not scared of Franmil Reyes right now. We all know Franmil is super streaky, right? Like he's going to go off. That time is going to come this season where he's going to be hitting almost 400. He's just going to be raking. He's going to be spraying the ball all over the field, and we're all going to love him again. But when he's in these kinds of slumps, like his head's gone. Like his confidence is shot. Like you mentioned, his eye at the plate is off right now. He's struggling. He's swinging at everything. And I think moving him down, a couple spots is kind of going to relieve some of that pressure on him too. I don't see any problem with, bumping Josh Naylor or Owen Miller up to that 4 spot. And that's kind of leading into the next thing. Like Owen Miller has to continue getting every day at bats the way he's performing.
Right.
And what does that mean? This pains me to say it because I've always been a Bobby Bradley supporter. I will admit, I will go back in the archives and I will admit that I was screaming for him to come up last year. I was so sick of Jake Bauers. I definitely was one of those people, but we have more information now. And it just doesn't look like he's going to have a future here. Friday, you talk about the turning points Friday. And another one was the number of guys Bobby Bradley left on base. And he's another guy. Like when he's slumping like this, he's what? He's hitting 067 this year, has 8 strikeouts and 16 at bats. And he's just bringing nothing to the table right now. Like the Guardians as a team left 7 guys on base Friday, and a lot of those came, I don't have a specific number in front of me, but a lot of those came when Bobby Bradley was up to bat. But, we just found out today that the rosters don't have to go back to 26 until May 30th now instead of May 1st. But even with that fact, you have to think that his time's starting to get really, really short here with no options remaining, but just based off, how Owen Miller is playing, what are you kind of feeling about big old Bobby right now?
I mean, at the game on Sunday, it was already 10-0 at this point. They threw him in to get a pinch hit at bat. He did get on base with a broken bat single, which then led to us scoring a run on the, I believe it was the Andres Jimenez triple, right? So maybe, that gets him out of a slump. I doubt it. But it has been disappointing because you see guys like Ernie Clement, who does get some playing time. You see guys like Owen Miller, who is absolutely taking advantage of every single time he steps out on that field, whether it be on the defensive end or, his job at the plate offensively. But it seems like Bobby, man, we've been giving him a lot of time. We've been looking at it like, okay, we saw what you can do in the minors. You hit nukes, right? You're launching balls over the left field wall. And it's just time to have that translate to this kind of level because this is where it counts, right? This is where you make the real money. And if we're going to have you on a roster for 162 games in a season, we can't have this kind of play. So I'm fully expecting Bobby to be, sent down, with this new MLB rule of roster spots through May 30th. I believe that you can field 14 pitchers. So you have that extra roster, or you have a couple extra spots. And I don't know. I don't really see Bobby having too much success right now. I think he needs to regroup down in AAA, maybe even some at-bats in AA, wherever he lands. I know that our front office and Tito are going to coordinate and handle that properly. But Let's just roll right into it. I mean, Saturday was something that we haven't seen in the majors in a little bit of time. We've seen umpires make bad calls, and players, fans, they get all riled up. Things end up on the field, whether it be an ejection and players throwing bats, balls, whatever it might be, or, you have some fans, most notably, the one I'm thinking of was back in, I believe it was like 2014. I think the Braves were in the playoffs playing against the Cardinals, and there was like an infield fly that was, damn near right in the middle of the outfield. There was a pop fly that was in the middle of the outfield. It got called an infield fly, and the batter was out. And then I just start seeing bottles and trash being thrown everywhere. But what happened on Saturday was really, really disappointing as a baseball fan to see. Not only as a Guardians fan, where it's happening to your own players that you root for, but just as a whole, like completely classless. I'm almost at a loss for words. And for anybody that doesn't know what we're referring to right now, on Saturday, in the ninth inning, there was a double hit by I'm forgetting his name right now. Mel, you help me out with his name real quick. Let's see. Was it Connor Falefa?
Connor Falefa hit the game tying double, and then
Gleyber
Torres hit the game winner.
Right. So Connor Falefa hits a ball to right over Stephen Kwan's head. He runs into the wall, clearly shaken up. And what ensues after that is, while Kwan's laying on the ground being tended to by trainers, you have New York Yankees fans, cursing at him, flipping him off, yelling things that certainly aren't appropriate, especially if you're a guy that just paid for a $56 ticket at a major league game. Like there's just no place in the sport to talk to professional athletes that way, as tough as you want to be. It was just really disappointing. And then what happened is Miles Straw was like, I'm done with this. He climbs the fence, he gets into the guy's face, and he basically tells him, lay a hand on me, see what happens to you, right? As I'm not going to let law enforcement take care of it. I'll do it myself. And to get a player that heated, it's just disappointing as a baseball fan. Like, these guys are going out there and they're playing for your entertainment. They're playing for their jobs in front of their family, their friends. I believe Oscar Mercado's family was in attendance that day. Disgusting to see. I wanted to hear your thoughts on it, though.
Yeah, so like Miles Strauss and even Mercado to an extent as a person, like they've shot to the top of my list as like teammates, because like you said, Kwan was still down after given 100% effort, trying to keep the lead there. And, they're still heckling him when he's down. And for Miles Straw to jump in like that, I think was really cool, because here's the thing, like, we all know who Miles Straw is. We all know who these players on the field are, but these fans get to just like yell whatever they want, say whatever kind of personal attacks they want at these guys, and we expect them to not have any reaction. But they're human, right? They're human beings before they're baseball players. So like when it reaches that certain point, like, you want a teammate, you want a brother to step in and have your back there. And then, like, obviously what ended up happening after Torres hit that game-winning hit, with the trash coming at Mercado, the beer bottles, it just uncalled for. It's classless. And I think what's even more classless about the whole thing is that the Yankees organization didn't release a single statement about it. There's no accountability. Those fans, there's so much security footage that parks have these days. Like, they need to be identified and banned for life, because you just can't have that. Like Mercado touched on it post game. Like, this is a game. It's supposed to be fun. It's for the fans' entertainment. You can't take it to that level, where you're throwing things on the field. And, I thought I give Judge Stanton and Rizzo credit for running, they were celebrating a game-winning hit, right, and they stopped what they were doing to run over and tell the fans to stop. And what it did was just put this black mark and like this cringe-worthy finish on a game that the Yankees should have been celebrating. That should have been a really nice win for their fans. This weekend against the Guardians, they kind of broke out of their slump. Cole broke out of his slump. Their bats woke up, and they should have been celebrating that. But instead, everybody was focused on the ugliness that transpired due to those few fans. And, I got no problem with how our guys reacted there. There's just got to be some kind of accountability with the fans.
And you just touched on it, like how utterly disappointing it was to not see anything brought out by the New York Yankees franchise on this.
Unreal.
Like, yeah, it's cool that Judge and Stanton go out there and tell him to stop Rizzo, right? I don't watch Yes Network. I don't know if they had any post-game comments, but I didn't see any posted.
Their own announcers were talking shit on these fans. Like, they were calling them a disgrace and everything.
It's just total, and especially, after a walk-off win, the game is over, right? And you start throwing things. You're
For
scum.
what? Like, yeah.
You are scum. And, we'll get into this a little bit later, but I was at the game on Sunday. And I bought the tickets an entire month before any of this happened. And I was actually sitting exactly where it happened, where Miles Straw got up on that fence and everything. And there was law enforcement everywhere. There were police officers specifically in that section. And there were actually 2 fans that were ejected for heckling, like just utter nonsense, trying to get into, Stephen Kwan, I believe he strained his hamstring, and Ernie Clement took over for him. And they were Ernie was having a good time. I think it was quite the experience for him. He turned around a couple times and smiled, but you just had 2 guys just kicked out because they couldn't, they just had to be tough guys, right? And yep. New York, sometimes guys, I live in New York, and I'll go to Yankees games even when they're not playing the Guardians, specifically to walk out of that ballpark that night without them talking a bunch of crap. I love seeing New York fans sad. And I'll say it to any New Yorker, whoever wants to, come talk sports with me. I hate your franchises with all of my heart. And this did not do anything good for you guys, at least in my head. Not that any of you care, but I just want to.
They're sad today with the Brooklyn sweep.
Yeah. And the Nets, what you trash. And the Knicks will never succeed. And the Giants are worse off than the Browns have been in the last 2 decades. Like, I don't want to hear it. And the Jets, oh man. Well, talk about a more irrelevant franchise in sports. They're right up around where the Minnesota Timberwolves were like 3 years ago. Like, nobody even knew they played anymore. So,
yeah.
We'll get off the New York hate and right back into it. But yeah.
Another thing about like, I saw fans, like, I get the frustration was at like an all-time high with all the fans after the way that one ended. But like earth to everybody who's saying this, like, Emmanuel Clase does not suck. Yeah. Like, let's all just repeat this to ourselves. Like, Emmanuel Clase does not suck. I know he blew the save Saturday. I still trust him 10 out of 10 times. It's such a prisoner of the moment, lazy take to sit there after a game like Saturday and say that he sucks.
Right.
Look what last season showed us. He had a slow start last season. It takes him time to get a feel for that slider. He overthrows his fastball. We know this about him. Mm-hmm. He is a kid who's still growing in the closer's role, who has a cannon of an arm. He's going to be just fine. As we saw over the final 2-3 months of last season, he was lights out, probably one of the best in the game. And he was 2 for 2 in save opportunities before blowing the save Saturday. I just want everybody to just take a deep breath. Emmanuel Clase is the least of this team's worries right now. Yeah. He's going to be just fine. He's still the anchor of that bullpen, and I am 100% sure he is going to get it figured out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, guys, other than like Mariano Rivera, who even himself got tagged a couple times, like, no one is supposed to be on that guy's level, right? What did he have? He had like a 90, 94, 95% save rate. Like, he didn't blow many in his career. That's like the dream closer. And that's, no one is ever going to be even close to that. So, to rat on Emmanuel Clase for a bad outing. And it wasn't
lazy.
even, yeah, it's lazy. And It's it sucks, right? But you move on, and that's just the way it goes.
I'll
But
tell you a guy who wasn't lazy on Saturday, Eniel De Los Santos. And
yeah.
I have been talking about this kid since spring training. He should have been added to the 40 and made the team out of spring training. He didn't, simply just because of where the roster was at. But he looked so good coming on in relief of Cal Quantrill. He struck out 2 straight. And if you remember, there was that horrible balk call. And he just comes back next pitch, strikes him out anyways. Like it was nothing to him. Like this kid was up there throwing utter gas. And he's earned the right to stay. I don't care anymore. I will drive Logan Allen to Hopkins Airport myself. I will buy him a Spirit airline ticket if he needs it. But Eniel De Los Santos deserves to stay on this team. And here's the thing, I don't hate Logan Allen. I think he's got decent stuff that if he goes to a team where he can afford to work on that in a starter's role, I still think he could have some success at the major league level. But the way this roster is constructed, he's not going to get a chance to start on this team just due to the depth we have behind the solid 5 guys we have. But we also have Sam Hentges, who I know I've been clowning Sam Hentges for a long time, and I was calling for his DFA back before the lockout started. But I got to give credit where it's due, and he's looked pretty good from the left side so far in the early going, minus the couple wild pitches he had in Cincinnati. I mean, he's been doing a pretty great job, and it is surprising. But he's kind of, in my opinion, overtaken Logan Allen as that kind of go-to lefty out of the pen. So I think it's another one of those situations, just like Bobby Bradley, where it's one of those things that might benefit both sides. He could go somewhere and have a chance to start because his stuff plays better in a starter role than, just trying to come in for 1 inning. I don't think he has the overpowering stuff to really be successful in that role. I think he's definitely, at his best as a starter, and that just doesn't play on this team right now. But Eniel De Los Santos, he needs to stay on this team. Like, he throws gas, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, he was pretty exciting to watch. But another guy that, Mel and I have been just berating all preseason, so far all season long, Austin Hedges, out of all people, put the Guardians up 4-3 in the 8th inning with a 2-run home run on Saturday off Chad Green, who Cleveland still owns. You suck, Chad. But Sean, yeah. So, yeah, Austin Hedges. I was at the game on Sunday. I think he had like 2 out of our 5 hits. He did have that whopping .089 batting average. It is moved up to 135. So he might start getting into this little groove. I think going into Sunday, he was on a 5-game hit streak, or going into last night, he was on a 5-game hit streak. Obviously, nothing happened last night offensively for the Guardians, but hopefully this is a sign of things to come. And because we can't rely on Lavastida to be our everyday starter. I think hopefully
and
this is a good thing.
He got sent down too, so Luke Maley got activated off the injured list, and he was raking in his rehab assignment at Columbus. But yeah, so I think maximizing Hedges' value, I think in a couple years, this lineup could be good enough to where we can afford to have Hedges hitting 100 or whatever he hits. But I think for right now, if him and Luke Maley can kind of split time almost evenly,
yeah.
I think we would see a pretty drastic improvement, towards the end of that lineup. And not that I'm expecting the catcher to do much. I'm not expecting them to hit 300, hit 25 home runs, but just to kind of give us a chance in that 8-9 spot out of the lineup, I think would go a long way in this lineup. But, you do kind of pay for that elite defense Hedges brings. So at least there's that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and we all know Hedges is in there to call the pitches, call the games, throw out batters, right? Or throw out, would-be base stealers. But yeah, I mean, hopefully it's a sign of good things to come. He's strung along a couple games with some hits. So, I mean, hopefully it continues in the warm weather, starting tonight in LA. So yeah, I mean, just to recap Sunday's game, nothing at all went right. I was hoping to show up to the park for a revenge game, and
Tough game for
just
you,
seemed
Max.
that like the defense, there was a lot that went wrong communication wise. There was a couple pop-ups that just landed.
Straw and Jimenez, what was like
Yeah,
Straw was charging so hard and Jimenez just gave up on it because Straw was charging so hard. It
yeah.
was weird.
When I saw that live, I was like, did they call it an infield fly? Like, why'd you move? What are you doing? Like, and then a run score. Like, I'm thinking like, oh, that's definitely not deep enough to get a run home. And then it just falls. And that was like the third one that fell in between Straw and Jimenez or whoever was playing second base that day. But, or no, what was that, Jimenez? Either way, whatever.
Yeah.
We need to shapen up on the defensive end. It was not a good game on Sunday at all. Savali, I think that's what we need to talk about right now, because he hasn't been anything that we have ever seen him be before. Like, he is having a rough stretch at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and it is. I definitely think it's time to be a little bit concerned about Aaron Savali because, as the listeners know, he was kind of the guy I predicted should get that next contract extension out of the starters. And he's just not the normal sharp Aaron Savali we're used to. And I know it can't be understated. He was a team player up, so he was a little busier during the lockout than some of the other guys. And he was also sick during the shortened spring training, so he got less reps than some of the other pitchers. And he's a big routine guy. Routine is so big for him that, you know, the concerning thing to me is the home runs. He's given up a lot of home runs. You know, we know he's 0-2 with a 9.58 ERA and just 10 and a third innings. And there is hope, though. The important thing is he's healthy physically after the injury last season. And it, you know, with him being such a creature of habit, it just tells me that the more reps he gets, I think he's going to start to settle in. But yeah, I mean, if he's struggling this much, like around the All-Star break, it's going to be something to watch because Daniel Espino is, I mean, dominating Double-A isn't quite the word. I think he struck out the first like 9 batters he faced the other day in his start, and he's going to be in Columbus sooner rather than later. And I mean, it's weird, you know. He could even push for a chance later this season to get a start in. So Aaron Savali definitely has to settle in here a little bit, but I just think like there's been signs of hope, like against San Francisco, right? He was really good to start that game until he gave up the home run. You know, he'll be on a good roll. He gives up the long ball and then the wheels kind of fall off. And especially last season, he started so strong. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Right. I think at one point he was like 8-2. Like, I mean, he was really
a Cy Young favorite last year. He definitely would have been an all-star too before the finger.
Right. And then the finger injury. But what keeps me confident about Savali is like he's sort of like in a way, you know, not talent-wise. He reminds me of Corey Kluber. Not really many emotions, just all business, gets the job done. And what keeps me confident about Aaron Savali is that he just needs one good quality start to get him back, right? Like you mentioned that San Francisco game, right? But I wouldn't necessarily call that like a bounce back for him. You know, we still ended up losing the game. Not much offensive, power for us to really gain anything back after the loss of those runs. But I'm still confident that he can, get back on track this season. Like, we keep on saying it's only April, but it has been really, really bad. And it hasn't just been like, oh, he's not his old self. He's a different player right now. So I'm sure that they're focusing on him and his mechanics, and Carl Willis is probably spending most of his time, fixing Aaron Savali up. But another guy that we were speaking about earlier on in the podcast, Mercado, you were tweeting the other day that he had a perfect setup for a bounce back game after everything that ensued on Saturday, and just the absolute opposite happened. And to watch, from my view in the stands, just the heckling going on after he overruns a simple line out, and he drops the fly ball, or he drops like a weak pop out.
The
and
throw to
foul
second
ground.
too. Like Rizzo,
He's not fast.
I've never seen somebody lumber into second base as slow as Rizzo did and get the double. And really all Mercado consistently brings is good defense. That's why I've always said his best value is a late inning replacement. And he just tanked on defense Sunday. And I wonder if, the hecklers were getting in his head a little bit. Because as a whole, it was disappointing to see the team come out as flat as they did Sunday after such an emotional ending. But I think it's just one of those things. They just had to get out of New York. New York woke up, their fans were in it, and they just had to get out. I just hope New York didn't break this team for the foreseeable future, because it carried over into last night's game in Anaheim a little as well.
And disappointing game last night as well. Shane Bieber goes out there and going into the seventh inning.
He should never came out for the seventh. And this is what Tito does. It's one thing that Tito kind of has a track record of. He lets the guys talk him into going back out. And here's the thing. I wouldn't even be mad if he sent him out in the seventh to face 8 and 9 again. That's fine. But you got to bring Stefan in to face Taylor Ward that's the fourth time Ward faced Bieber, and he already homered off of him. Why would you let him face Bieber for a fourth time? And he was at 100 pitches. It's April.
It's the end of the line.
It's April. Why are we trying to blow his shoulder out again? His velocity is already down. I don't think we need to be playing with Bieber's arm this early in the season, Max.
Yeah. I completely agree. Not like anything actually mattered. We didn't even put up a single run, but
my guy Richie though, 2 for 3 in his debut.
Richie Palacios.
I told y'all. I tried telling you.
He likes the oppo. He likes oppo hits, man. And
same
that
approach,
guy,
both
same
times.
approach.
It was beautiful.
I kind of expect him to sort of be like a Steven Kwan, just a guy that like you're expecting to just be some rook stepping up to the plate. Oh, I'll blow him away with a fastball. Boom, first pitch, right field. Yeah, maybe next time, bud. Like I think his approach, and even on the fly out, that was to deep center. It looked like good contact. He missed a fraction of an inch. That's
and he's got a little more pop than Kwan. He's super fast. Once he gets on, he made it to second. They called it a single and an error on his second hit. Yeah, that's a double. But he was flying
he
out of the box
a little bit. That's why,
And what a cool moment that was for Dre to be interviewing his parents on that second hit. That was so wholesome.
Yeah, that was really cool.
I love that.
That was really cool.
He's got a great story. For anybody who hasn't heard it, you should go over to the Future Guardians of the Land and listen to Kevin's interview with him, because kids just worked his ass off to get to where he is today. He's really easy to root for.
Yeah. And just you were just saying that, like that interview live with Andre Knott, like his mother jumped out of her seat and
screaming.
It was really cool thing to see. I think he also had a stolen base last night, so if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure, but
no, he was trying, but they were holding him so tight at first. They knew he could take off.
Maybe it was the speed. I was getting a little ahead of myself, but there's nothing not to like about him so far. He's gone up, taking a simple approach, had 2 hits, 2 out of our 3 last night. So just a really, 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 really ugly stretch of offense for the Guardians. What is that now? So that's 1 + 2. I think we've scored like 5 runs in our last 4 games. That's just over 1 a game. That's not going to get it done.
We were talking about it earlier. First 2, Miles Straw is struggling a little bit, and I think this is a different lineup when Straw is on his game.
Mm-hmm.
But we're starting to see, the Angels did it last night. They're pitching around Jose a little bit, and Jose's getting frustrated. He's swinging at balls out of the zone, which is really uncharacteristic of him. But it's because Franmel's struggling so bad behind him. As we mentioned, he just looks lost. And when there's 2 guys on and you have a 3-0 count, there's no reason to be swinging at that next pitch when you're as cold as you are. Take the base. So I'm all on board. Move Naylor or Miller up to 4 until Franmil can get his head out of his ass.
Right. Yeah. And he will in due time.
He will.
It happens to all major leaguers. They all get in a slump. And, especially at the beginning of the season, we're expecting what they look like in mid-season form. and it's just not how it goes. So, I mean, we just need to be a little bit more patient. But tonight we do have a matchup against the Los Angeles Angels here, or Anaheim, excuse me. So we got Tristan McKenzie versus Patrick Sandoval. I believe Patrick's making his first appearance of the year tonight, so hopefully we can get him rattled early. I think that's a huge key for the Guardians. When they score early, they're relentless, right?
Yeah.
There aren't many times where we score a couple runs through 3 innings where we don't just pile on. Like you were mentioning earlier on in the podcast, feast or famine for us. So let's start off on the right note tonight and score a couple runs in the first inning and let Tristan McKenzie do what he does, because he's had a couple unlucky breaks this year, but solid 2.38 ERA. And whenever that kid takes them out, I'm just excited to see what he's going to do. So, but just to recap what's going on throughout the rest of the series, we have a showdown with Zach Plesac and Shohei Ohtani. So that's going to be quite the matchup. Plesac's having a phenomenal season so far. And then Cal Quantrill and Reed Detmers to cap it off on Thursday. Hopefully we can walk away these next 3 games, Mel, with 3 wins and get back on track.
Head into Oakland, 3 more winnable games.
Right. We need to get the wins when we can get them early, because that's when they're going to count late in the season. But Cleveland, just a little fun fact about the Angels. They went 5-1 against them last season, so we already got the loss out of the way. Let's just rack up those wins, right?
That's right.
I mean, that basically that's basically what we're going to be seeing over the next couple of days. And really wanted to
we got a special addition to this week's episode. And I want to remind everybody, if you have any questions you'd like to hear answered on the show, tweet at either Max or I at MaxwellG24 and at Mello_NIE91, or the podcast page, Guardians OTCLE. And we'll get your questions answered on the show. But tonight we have a few from Chuck, who is a loyal listener and supporter. His first question is, how long do we have to suffer with Ahmed at short? And my kind of answer, we'd need a whole nother podcast episode for me to share how I feel about Ahmed Rosario right now. But my kind of short answer is his contract's up after next season. So he's kind of on that same trajectory that Jose was when we were talking about, if Jose didn't sign this year, we'd have to trade him. So his team control's dwindling, and Arias is at AAA forcing his way into Cleveland. So I'd say they kind of have to move him at the trade deadline. It's just a matter of what's his value going to be. He's got to start hitting. This is almost like an audition for his future team. And, across the board, he's a very major league average hitter, which is super beneficial to teams. There's going to be a team in contention that definitely wants to add his bat, because his bat's what he brings to the table. He's not that great defensively. He kind of doesn't have a position. So right now it's just basically trying to showcase him and just try to get as much as we can for him. What are your thoughts, Max?
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of hard watching, especially when we've, been watching Francisco Lindor man that shortstop position for the last 5-6 years. So I've always liked Ahmed. It's just he needs to stay consistent, and his defense isn't his strong suit. Maybe moving him over to second base could be an option. Outfield, I'm definitely not confident throwing him out there as an everyday starter. So, I mean, his power is at the plate. And, if he wants to be an everyday starter in the league, it's just got to pick up a little bit. And I expect it to. We've been saying over and over, it's just the beginning of the season. But we'll just have to see what happens. But I do like that question from Chuck. It's certainly something we've been focusing on throughout the past couple of weeks. But he had another question here: prediction for a prospect breakout this season outside of Gavin Williams and the top 5. So who do you got?
I got Nick Mikolajchak, a guy I've talked about before on here, power arm out of the bullpen. He was our 11th round pick in 2019 out of Sam Houston State. He's currently Columbus's closer. He's pitched 6 2/3 innings, 1-0 record. He hasn't allowed a run in those 6 2/3 innings. He's got 7 strikeouts to go with an 0.75 whip with 2 saves. He was also Akron's closer last year at AA during their championship run, but he's only 24. His fastball hits 95, sometimes as high as 97, and he's got a nasty slider with a curve and a change that he can use if necessary. Some scouts have compared him to James Karinchak, obviously when James Karinchak is like on his game. But I predict we're going to see him in the Guardians bullpen probably, depending on injuries and whatnot, probably around mid-season, but he's got electric stuff. So, people who haven't seen video or seen him in
Right.
person yet, I think people are going to be really impressed by the arm this kid has.
Right. And he's only 24 years old. So, I mean, there's a lot of future left, potentially within the organization. So this kid is only something that we can be excited about, guys.
And we know how this organization is with arms.
Yeah. And
Never
especially
enough.
our farm system, better than every single other major leagues farm system year in, year out. I mean, we have the prospects, we have the pieces. I mean, we have AAA championships, AA, whatever division it might be. So I mean, yeah, can't wait to see his development and him progress. And I'm sure we'll see him at Progressive Field at some point this season. But just to roll into Chuck's last question here, who will get cut or sent down when rosters are shortened from 28 to 26 on May 1st?
And as we learned this morning, they actually don't need to be reduced until May 30th now.
May 30th.
So they can carry the 14 pitchers, like you mentioned earlier, Max, until May 30th. So it changed my answer a little bit because I originally said that, Eli Morgan might get sent down just because of the pitcher limit at 13, but we're not going to have to worry about that for another month. So, Eli Morgan still might get sent down at some point just so they can fully stretch him out as a starter. But again, I mentioned the Logan Allen DFA already. I think that could happen because, like I said, I'd much rather have Eniel De Los Santos in the bullpen, but he's just, he was brought up as a COVID replacement. So we'll see what ends up happening with him. But we already talked about Bobby Bradley, but another guy to watch is Yu Chang. So they actually sent him to AAA after he was activated off the COVID list, which he's the only guy they did that with, instead of immediately joining the team. And, there just aren't at-bats for him consistently. We've already talked about Owen Miller, Ernie Clement, Andres Jimenez. We got all these guys in the middle infield who are just begging for at-bats, and they're all playing well. Just like Bobby Bradley, he has no options left either. So he's another guy who would have to be designated for assignment. That might not happen until closer to June 1st when Gabriel Arias will probably undoubtedly get called up because his bat's not cooling off at all down at AAA.
Yeah. I mean, well, I guess we'll have to see what happened. These were the names we've been mentioning for a long time: Bobby Bradley, Yu Chang. We'll just have to see what moves we're going to be making towards the end of May, what kind of condition the team is going to be in at that point. But yeah, that basically caps off the episode here. I really wanted to thank everybody for tuning in and listening. Please always remember to like, share, subscribe to Believeland Media LLC. Follow us on Twitter at MaxwellG24, at Mellow underscore NIE
Melanie.
and Melanie. And really do appreciate it. Send in your questions just like Chuck. I really want to thank him as well for adding to the podcast here. But until next time, I'm just gonna pass it off to my co-host Mel to take us away.
Yeah, so everybody drink some coffee now that you've listened to the episode. Try to get us through another couple late nights out on the West Coast during the work week. Let's hope the Bats wake up tonight. Give Tristan some run support early. I think they're going to, that's a good formula for a W tonight. But we'll also keep an eye on Stephen Kwan's hamstring. Andre Knott mentioned on the broadcast last night he was going to do some work on that hamstring today. They were going to have him run a little bit to see how he responded. And, depending on how he responded, he could either be in the lineup tonight or be headed to the injured list. So that'll probably also depend on how long Richie Palacios is up here. So definitely a situation we want to monitor. We'll try to keep you guys up to date and post any updates as we get them. So like Max said, I want to thank you all for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you next week.